Hello everyone and welcome back. I am as always Inquisitor Aura, and this is how to roleplay in World of Warcraft, and this week we're going to be taking a look at the much requested Night Elven Death Knights. Night Elven Death Knights are very similar to many other Death Knights. They often find themselves the victims of the dark magic that they wield and have had these powers thrust upon them by the Lich King and his minions. However, the Kaldare had a darkness within them. The Highborn flaunted it as they nearly brought the world to its knees. The Shaldare drink of the Nightwell to gain power, and Illidan Stormrage made bargains with dark forces to achieve the strength that he has now. They have not forgotten the continent-spanning empire they once ruled. They have not forgotten the powers they once wielded. Inside the majority of the Kaldare, especially those who have been alive since the War of the Ancients, a shadow looms. Despite their seemingly altruistic natures embodied in elves such as Malfurion Stormrage, Tyrande Whisperwind, and Jared's Shadowsong, the Kaldare are a people who are used to power, and many of them would do anything to have it back. Now, one of the most common places that you're going to find Night Elven Death Knights coming from is going to be from Mount Hyjal. Night Elven Death Knights can come from just about anywhere at this point, but a lot of them first encountered the Scourge at Mount Hyjal, and therefore it makes a lot of sense that most Kaldare Death Knights probably died there during Archimonde's assault on the World Tree. And from there were raised to becoming Death Knights. Males likely would have been recently awakened druids, and females would have been priestesses or sentinels, because back during the battle for Mount Hyjal, those two classes were still gender segregated, not like they are now. Now, this isn't a universal thing. The Night Elves did join the Alliance after this and were active amongst them prior to the events of Wrath of the Lich King, but it is a good place to start if you don't want to go super crazy with your backstory. While their backstories can be wildly varied, but mostly likely coming from Mount Hyjal, it's important to remember that Night Elven society as it currently views Kaldare Death Knights as an abomination. Since the War of the Ancients and the near complete abandonment of the arcane, Kaldare society has turned from one focused on harnessing power to one of balancing the world and protecting nature. Night Elves, above all other races, understand that life is a cycle. A cycle. It is rebirth, it is death. It is birth, life, death, rebirth. That is how it is. That is how they understand the world. The prevalency of druidism in modern Kaldare society is what keeps this cycle spinning, so on and so forth. Death Knights as a whole, but especially Night Elven Death Knights, are an interruption of that cycle, an unnatural stop in the cycle of life and death. Life feeds death, which then feeds life, and thus Death Knights are seen as abnormalities. However, as Night Elves are a notoriously long-lived race, even without their vaunted immortality, with such lifespans can come feelings of bitterness and anger, and especially arrogance. Remember that not all Night Elves willingly walked this tree-hugging path. This leads us to a very interesting potential. Many of those Kaldare who gave up the arcane may have sought a different kind of power to fill that void they might have had in them. Many stuck to the path of the Arcanist, but it is possible to have sought out the power of a Death Knight. Now, this would likely be rare, but not unheard of. Consider Night Elven history. Once upon a time, they ruled the face of Azeroth. Many of the Night Elves you'll meet across Azeroth now may have had first-hand knowledge of this time, though there are many who were born and raised during the Long Vigil. For thousands of years, they were the dominant species on the planet. And while no longer immortal, the Night Elves have had centuries to develop the mindset often associated with longer-lived races. There is no small amount of arrogance in them. It took them a very long time to come to grips with their situation and find the path that many of them walk now, but some of them likely never did. They remember when they built twisting towers and marbled cities on the backs of the arcane power they wielded. The Elves of Eldrath are the epitome of this lifestyle, having maintained it for the most part. These elves, or elves who upheld these ideals, may very well have actively sought the power of a Death Knight. And one of the last things we need to talk about when we're talking about Night Elven Death Knight, or any Elven Death Knight, I suppose you could actually say, are Banshees. Now, this is a little bit delicate, but it can work, and don't let anybody tell you that it can't. We need to talk about Banshees, as Banshees are almost exclusively Elven females, though there have been cases of males. For the most part, Elven females. So if you're playing an Elven female Death Knight, you could probably easily pull this off. Banshees are the souls of Elven women who died horrendously. To X. It doesn't make a difference to what. As long as it was fairly ugly and graphic and, not very nice. Elven female souls, for some reason, get this vengeful quality to them, and it allows them to become this preternatural, spirit-like being who can scream at things and do serious damage. They have been around since the War of the Ancients. That is the time of the very first recorded Banshees, when Night Elven females were killed at the hands of the Legion. Remember that a large part of the Night Elven population was destroyed during that devastation. Given this, it is very possible for female Elven Death Knights of all Elven races, not just Night Elves, to actually be Banshees. Allow me to put some context to this. Banshees have the ability to possess bodies. They don't have to be living. They don't have to be dead. It just has to be a body. They can force their way into living bodies and simply inhabit dead ones. Keep in mind that this doesn't automatically make them Dark Rangers. Dark Rangers simply add this Banshee power to their already impressive array of skills, specifically as scouts and archers. Being a Banshee and possessing a body does not make one a Dark Ranger unless the person who was killed and is now a Banshee was already a Ranger. Becoming a Death Knight requires a soul to leave its body. You have to be dead before you can become undead. That's just the way it is. Now, given that a Banshee is a dispossessed female elven soul who has the ability to take over the body of either a living person or a dead body, any random dead body, honestly, it is possible for a Banshee to have been forced to repossess their own recently turned bodies. Now, it's very likely that the window of opportunity for such a binding would be short, but honestly, as it has never really been addressed, you go ahead and play with that time however you want to. If the elven female in question becomes a Banshee while her body is being raised as a Death Knight, then it is possible for you to be both a Banshee and a Death Knight. Now remember that Banshees can both be created. In this case, you probably killed by the Scourge or by the Legion or by, whoever. Or born of natural causes in that they died at the hands of somebody else outside, not necessarily, one of the major enemies of Azeroth, but they died due to violent circumstances. The Scourge made ample use of Banshees in battle, so it makes sense that they would try to get the best of both worlds, Banshees and Death Knights, into one body. All in all, Night Elf Death Knights are, for the most part, no different from normal Death Knights. There should be no reason why you should have any trouble role-playing one. Yes, they might be a lot older, and yes, some of them might be Banshees, and yes, some of them might actually have wanted to become Death Knights, but that's all just part of your backstory. Go ahead and play with it, do what you like. I know a lot of people have said that they have had trouble role-playing as a Night Elf and Death Knight, or they have had people giving them problems about how they choose to roleplay a Night Elf and Death Knight. There is virtually no difference between a Night Elf and Death Knight and a human Death Knight, or an Orc Death Knight, or a Troll Death Knight. Death Knights, almost universally as a whole, have had this power forced on them. Night Elves have a long history of power grabbing and power abuse, so you can use that to play into your background. And yes, it is absolutely fine for you to be a Night Elf who was present during the War of the Ancients and now be a Death Knight, because if you think that hasn't happened, well, you need to look around a little bit, because most of the Night Elves that you see around, at least a good solid 30% of those have been alive, have been around since the War of the Ancients, and those that haven't were taught about the War of the Ancients and were born during the Long Vigil. In any case, a Night Elf and Death Knight is still just a Death Knight, and all Death Knights serve the Ebon Blade. Well, that is going to be it from me for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you like what you see and you want to see more, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. I also have a Patreon. The link is in the description box below, as well as up in my channel header art. So if you want to help me improve my video quality, make sure you stop on by and donate. Remember, your donations go directly to things to improve the quality of my videos and may lead to more videos per week. Anyways, guys, thank you again so much for watching. Have a great week, have a great weekend, and I will see you again in Azeroth.